You're watching The Nation. Let's go to our media panel now. Welcome to Bill Ralston and Brian Edwards. This week, Prime Minister John Key declined our invitation to appear on The Nation this weekend. He also didn't front up to Question Time on Thursday. But he did squeeze in an appearance on More FM's breakfast show with Si and Gary. And here's what listeners learnt over their morning cereal.
I've got to tell you, in the real world in New Zealand, there are people who have been training for Al-Qaeda camps, who operate out of New Zealand, who are in contact with people overseas, who have gone off to Yemen and other countries to train. I'm sorry, but it's the real world. And if people don't want you to... Yes, absolutely.
See, that's a stunning admission that we've never heard from you before.
Isn't it just? Goodness me. So John Key says, in the real world, we do have Al-Qaeda operatives heading off from New Zealand to train in Yemen.
Well, he's finally got around to doing what he should have done in the first place, and the government should have done, and that's sell the bill, sell the need for the bill, market the fact that you believe there are threats to New Zealand's security out there. And going on More FM, not a bad move. It's got a big audience. He goes to The Edge. He goes to all other radio stations around the country. They've got a huge audience out there. Not a bad place and a time to do it, except he should have started doing the sales work a lot earlier.
And that's the issue here, isn't it? That he's choosing interesting places, the Prime Minister, with which to make an announcement like that. If you were going to do that, perhaps you could choose a political program or national radio.
Yes, but it would be much more difficult to do that if you were doing the interview or Paddy Gower was doing the interview or Duncan Garner was doing the interview. So you go on a radio program in the morning, it's going to be a very easy situation for you to be in. Everybody's nice and chatty. It's a sort of a boys' show, that particular show, isn't it? And we'll all be boys together. And actually, I mean, I'm interested at the end of that interview. It wasn't actually the end because they actually tried to stop the interview after about 7 minutes. And no, he wanted to go on. He wanted another 3 minutes.
They keep trying to wind him up. You can wind him up and go, well, thank you very much, Prime Minister. And another thing, Yemen.
They couldn't wind him up. And it's a safe environment for him to do something because nobody's going to attack him. We're all lads together, you know, chatting on those sorts of shows. So I take a rather more cynical view of it than you, you know. Yes, sure, you're quite right, he's getting to this very big audience. But when you don't want to come on this programme and you'd rather go on More FM, there's something slightly dodgy there, in my view.
But having watched today's show, which concentrated all around the Andrew Vance issue, which came from the GCSB issue, you know, I have to wonder to what extent, while we're outraged by what's occurred, the average punter isn't. And I went around Auckland this week talking to the average punter, the butcher, and all kinds of people I ran into. What do you think of the Andrea Vance story? What do you think of the GCSB? And they all went, yeah, what's that about?
Yeah, so but that point is a very good point.
Well, either the media is not engaging them or they're just not engaging with the story.
We've had an absolutely marvellous programme on this whole subject this morning, but it is extremely complex to work out what actually happened. Who did what, who said what, who wrote what to whom and when. It's very, very hard to work out, and I think for that reason, people will judge this whole business according to their political prejudices. Well, so if you're a left-winger, you're going to see this as an absolute disgrace. If you're a right-winger, you're going to think, what's the problem?
And most of the people in the middle are going, what? I mean, a lot of people woken up and hear this, and it's like the family Labrador is accused of biting someone. They go, surely not. It couldn't have. Playful nip, surely. You know, must have been provoked. They can't really get their head around.
Trust you have a dog analogy. Well, every time I meet you, you're walking the streets of Ponsonby with dogs.
But they can't really understand how this government has suddenly turned into the surveillance state. Yeah. And is it as evil as it's been portrayed?
But then if you listen to what Paddy Gower said earlier, and he said, look, if you went up to someone on the street and said, do you think that, you know, that journalists should be able to operate freely and without being spied on, the average punter would say yes. So is it just that, you know, they're not getting to, you know, the public doesn't understand, without patronising the public, the core issue here? You know, journalists aren't the most popular people, having a bit of a tete-a-tete with the government at the moment.
Well, journalists are down there with politicians is one of the most despised occupations. It's very sad, actually, that is the case. But I actually think it really is the complexity of this issue. And more stuff comes out all the time. And it's actually very hard to understand this. And I think for that reason, people will they just go back to whatever their traditional prejudice and judge it in that way. I think it's a very serious business. I think we have very serious problems here about privacy and about spying on the citizen. Very serious indeed.
I agree. It's a hard story to sell, though. It's about constitutional issues, the Fourth Estate and things like that. And if you look at the evidence of the latest Roy Morgan poll, in the middle of all of this, National goes up to 51, Labour falls to 29.
Unbelievable.
It means the public, via the media, is not being engaged on this issue.
All right, moving on, but staying with politics, let's mention that Radio New Zealand has given up another staff member to the Labour Party media team. Dania Levy has joined David Shearer's office, joining her former colleague Julian Robbins. Maybe Dania can help Labour lift a little in the polls.
As the Cabinet always got anyone the National Party calls Radio Labour.
What sort of question is that? Maybe Dania can help Labour. Goodness me.
Look, the government always regard national radio in particular as Radio Labour. They call it that. And it does have a liberal left bias. It's no surprise that its journalists naturally progress into the opposition's office to pursue.
Is it not really a surprise?
I can't follow that at all. The woman is a journalist. She is a journalist. She's in the journalism business. A common area for people to go into is to be press officers or press secretaries to people in politics. That's what she's done. It's all perfectly normal.
None of them are beating a path to John Key's door, though.
Well, maybe they think he's a lost cause, Bill. That's
51%, Brian.
that's a possibility. But I think it's really very sad that when someone just makes a normal job shift, and she's going to be with someone, as you said, Julian, whom she knows, and who may well have said to her, there's a job going here that Shearer needs a new press secretary. The interesting thing for me is, because my wife wrote a whole thesis about this whole business about press secretaries, is that once you've moved in that direction from journalism into advising a political party or political leader, it's extremely difficult to go back again.
I think the real question is, does Shearer's office need yet another parliamentary press gallery type journalist, or does it need someone with real political nous in there, a political operator, like a John Pagani type of person?
Well, he's got Fran Mould, of course.
Well, she's a journalist.
Well, she is a journalist, but she's pretty experienced in that whole field.
Right, OK. Let's move on. Let's take a look at one of, well, we'll just say it's Brian's favourite TV programmes. There are lots of American accents in Spartacus. But the hit TV show was, of course, made right here in New Zealand. But a new government report has looked at the benefits of the Screen Production Grant, which gives money to these kinds of productions, and decided the grant may not be a great investment for our tax dollars after all. Brian, is this going to make any difference at all?
Well, I don't really not skilled enough to really answer that question, so I went and talked to John Barnett about it from South Pacific Pictures, who's very skilled. He really feels that the only person who's gained greatly from that particular fund in the past has been Peter Jackson. But he made a very interesting point to me, and he said that most New Zealanders imagine that the American movie makers are all just dying to get to New Zealand and make movies against our wonderful scenery. And he thinks this is absolute nonsense. He says they don't want to come to do that at all. If you take something like Game of Thrones, it's completely irrelevant to our beautiful scenery in New Zealand. So you make it in Belfast and you make it in Iceland when you're doing the ice scenes and so on. And we're too far away. For one thing, and our exchange rate is too high for them to want to come here. His view is this won't go very far, as I understand it.
Well, you wouldn't have a New Zealand screen industry without New Zealand on air, without funding from the Film Commission and grants like this one.
John Key's been talking about this week too.
Well, it's vital we have it. And the bureaucrats sit there counting as bean counters, saying, oh, well, there's no tangible benefit. It's the intangible benefits of being able to hear a New Zealand voice and New Zealand pictures and New Zealand sound and telling our own stories, rather than just being completely subsumed by the international material that comes into the country.
That sounds really grand, but I'm not sure how realistic that is.
All right, just quickly, gentlemen, Colosieum has given prospective customers a sneak preview of the kind of service they'll get if they sign up to watch the English Premier League online with them. You remember it was Colosieum who won the rights after outbidding Sky TV. Here it is here. Doesn't look too flash, does it? And the producer did. I said, look, I thought it was fine. Football fans will still watch it. The producer said, have a bit of difficulty apparently seeing the ball, which I guess is kind of crucial.
Yeah, look, I mean, it's early days for Colosieum. It will grow in subscribers. Its quality, its bandwidth will improve, I'm sure. They have to get it up to a decent standard. It's really the fact that they have started to actually bring in online viewing. And maybe 10 years from now, you'll see the real impact of a Colosieum.
Well, if I want to watch sport, I don't want to watch it on my computer. I want to watch it on my TV screen.
Ralston, Brian Edwards, thank you both.